Hello and welcome to the Navy Blue Corner. I'm Ian, joined as always by my good mate Lockie, and just like that, the season is over at the hands of the Brisbane Lions, going down by 16 points in the preliminary final. We were one game away from a grand final. It felt like it was almost destined to be our year. There were so many fairy tale-esque storylines that felt like they were building throughout that season. Ultimately, though, we fell short. It wasn't without a massive fight from the Blues to try and get us over the line, though. It was something definitely to be proud of, and we may as well start hot with our last match review of the 2023 season. Lockie, mate, how are you? What was your reaction at that final siren when it came, and how did your kind of feelings through that game and how the season ended evolve throughout the weekend?
Can't believe it, mate. 26th match review of the season. It's been a long one. Oh boy, so many mixed emotions about everything right now. I'm looking forward to getting into it all. The final siren. So I witnessed this game at Icon Park with the other thousands of supporters, which was just such a great vibe. I'm sure we'll get into that. Yeah, I guess the last few minutes of the game, we knew it was done. Like it, the fight back, it was just became too much. And when that final siren went, it was a standing ovation around Icon Park for the boys. And then I was just ready to get the hell out of there because I didn't want to think too much about it. And honestly, I haven't thought too much about it still. So this is going to be my therapy.
Yeah, I'm very keen to discuss it all because both of us haven't really chatted much about this game at all. We don't know how either one is feeling about this game. We've tried to save it all for the pod, so it's going to be interesting to see the emotions. I was at home. Unfortunately, wasn't able to get to Icon, but got to watch it with the partner, with my sister, with my grandparents. So it was a nice little family affair there, watching it on the TV. First quarter was definitely up and about with the atmosphere that we were trying to bring. And yeah, I think I was probably similar to you where because of the way the game played out, kind of knew it was going to be a loss in those last few minutes, going through it all in my head, trying to process it all. And I probably took the loss way better than I thought I was going to, which is maybe weird going into the game, not ridiculously confident, but still believed we could get it done and that this could be our year, that we could have made the grand final. But there was just an overwhelming feeling of, I guess, from what I just saw, the better team won. We just weren't there. We're just not at that level. We're bloody close, but we're just not that premiership team just yet. And I think not long after the siren, it was just, I'm just so proud of what I saw. It was a crazy season. Felt as if there was about 7 different seasons in the one. And even watching the Brownlow medal, when they go through each round, it felt like some of those games happened 3 years ago. It feels like it's been so long. Your feelings as they progress throughout the weekend, what were your kind of, I guess, takeaway feelings-wise from that loss? Were you looking at it and reflecting it as maybe that missed opportunity, or were you much more just trying to take in that season as a whole?
Oh, God, it is so mixed. It sounds like we're on similar pages, though, which is nice for a change. I almost feel like I haven't thought about it because this feels like something I need to talk about with my bloody therapist. I'm like, I've reacted so well to this loss and the season ending that I feel like if I go back and rewatch the game, it's going to like bring something out and I'm going to like bloody burst into tears or something thinking about what could have been. Because like I guess at quarter time, I was sitting there being like, oh my God, like we actually could do this. We were just being written off by everyone during the week. Like it felt like no one was giving us a real proper chance with everything that was going against us in this game. So I think in the back of my mind, that was always there. And so, when it didn't happen and when they were just so dominant in the second and third quarters and we just couldn't bloody do anything, it was kind of like, all right. Yeah, everything you just said, like they are just the ones that deserve to be there. But we are so close.
It's funny you mention that weird feeling and that it almost, there's that sense of I'm going to get unzipped if I watch this game again. Something's going to happen. And all of a sudden the mental
Literally,
breakdown
I'm
will
so
happen
calm.
weirdly. And I'm glad someone else is the same, because I had a lot of people that I was chatting to, Carlton supporters. They were obviously still proud of everything on reflection, but I think the loss still hit them quite a lot. And there was just that disappointment. And I just felt it so weird that I didn't necessarily get a lot of that. Like, obviously, I'm disappointed that we didn't make the grand final, but I thought I was going to be so much sadder at it all and about the loss. Whereas my emotions were kind of, I guess, focused on a different thing, where I was just, I guess, a bit more sad that I wasn't ready for the season to end. I wasn't ready to start doing end of season content, to look at the draft, to look at the trades. My brain wasn't there yet. And I was kind of annoyed the next day, probably on that Sunday, having to start to prepare for this and go, okay, well, I guess who are we looking at? How do we improve? And I started to get maybe a bit frustrated after the match happened the next day, going, I don't want to be here. I want to be looking at this grand final, but it's just so hard not to look back and be proud at what we've done. And yeah, I think when you just really take the result for what it was, we're just that one half step off being that premiership team.
It's interesting you say that. I actually feel like I was a bit the opposite to that reaction, where, like you said, I felt like this season is a whole bunch of seasons in one. It feels like it's been going for years. I almost had this kind of weird relief where it was like, I've just been through so much stress thinking about, the whole build up to getting into the finals, that massive run. We couldn't lose a bloody game if we wanted to get there. And then obviously the emotion of the first two finals wins and being there, it's like, Carlton has just consumed my life for so long that it was like, walking away from Icon Park, it was like, I don't have to think about Collingwood and what that is going to mean for everything over this next week. Even though I obviously wanted that, there was just this small part of like, fuck, the season is done. It has been an insane ride. And I'm definitely not ready to like talk about trades and stuff like that. I'm just like, let's just enjoy the fact that we got there and we played 3 finals and we played the quarter of our lives in that first as well, which is something to be proud of.
Yeah, it's such a weird feeling. Yeah, definitely. We wanted the grand final so bad. We wanted the flag so bad, but there's just been so many emotions building throughout this season, the ups and downs. There was probably, I think, a part in all of us that was like, oh, I can kind of detach now. I don't have to be holding on to everything every single day, but I would have loved it for one more week. But let's get into the game. We've got to start where it was very, very positive to kick things off. It was probably the best start I think we've had, definitely all year, but potentially ever that I've seen a Carlton team play. Probably some of the best football we've seen from this group. We kicked the first 5 goals away from home, under the pump. You mentioned there so much build up throughout the week. Didn't believe that Carlton were even a sniff in this game. Went into the quarter time break up by 23 points. I guess, what did you make of that blistering start? Was that something that you expected us to be able to do? And what were your kind of feelings at quarter time? Were you completely lids off, we're winning the flag, it's all over? Or were you a little bit more calm down and realistic?
Oh, God, there's so much in it. I think I definitely didn't have expectations similar to the first 2 finals. So it's not that it wasn't expected. I was just like, I have absolutely no idea how this game is going to start. But I think deep down inside me, like I said before, I had this, I was like, there's a possibility that Brisbane are going to come out and absolutely thrash us today. And this is going to be embarrassing. Like, they've had a week off. We've exerted everything to get here. Like, I was preparing myself that this could be bad. So definitely didn't expect this. And I'm so keen to hear from you. Like, when about halfway through the quarter, when we'd only kicked a couple of goals, it was like, oh my God, we've dominated so much and we're 2 goals up. Like, I really, really don't hope that, they level this up or we don't take advantage of all the opportunities. So at quarter time, I was like, this is great. This is a really good lead. But again, a part of me was like, God, how well we played. I feel like we could be even further ahead, which would have helped.
I definitely had the same feeling of, oh no, is this one of those Carlton games where we dominate but don't put it on the scoreboard? So I was very happy that when we kicked the first 5 goals, it felt like, okay, we're finally doing this, even though weirdly, maybe we still should have had more. But I guess that's what you think when you know how the game does play out. The start kind of was the worst thing for me in a way, because when I was building up the game in my head, I thought, okay, if we're any chance in this, if this is the game that we win, I think the way we get it done, get them early, jump out of the gate, kick the first few goals. Maybe it's 2, maybe it's 3, and then just sort of, because they've had that week off, because they're maybe a little bit sluggish, we've got the momentum, just ride that and keep that lead pretty much throughout the whole game. And when we started to do it, there were definitely feelings of, wow, like the pressure was up, the tackling was there. We were making Brisbane fumble. They couldn't hit a target.
How good
we were
was
pouncing on everything, and we still weren't perfect with ball in hand ourselves. So there was definitely another element of, well, okay, everything feels here, except we're still not 100% using it beautifully, and we maybe could add a few more goals. Imagine what happens maybe in the second quarter when we start to continue this. And so I was definitely very excited. The lid wasn't completely off. I was still trying to temper the expectations, because while we started so well, I knew it was all off the back of pressure. It was off the back of 5-1 center clearances, and you're not going to win the contested battle like that in the clearance battle for most of the game. Brisbane's a good team. They're going to react. It was just kind of how we dealt with that final moment when Brisbane does bring it to you, and when they're on top and the momentum swings. That's what I was kind of waiting for. But I definitely thought that, okay, with 5 of the first goals, we're up by 23 points. They'll come at us at some stage, but surely this is a big enough lead that we can try to hold this to the rest of the game. Is that kind of how you saw having just that perfect start for us, that little buffer?
Yeah, I think so. We're definitely on the same page, and I think, there was lots of little things that I think a lot of us were looking out for. So it was like, how's Harry going to go? He got his start. What about Charlie? He's got to stand up. He kicked his goal. Like Akers and Doherty, it was like, okay, they don't look like they're 100%, but they're involved. They're getting through it. Like the back line was standing up. Pito was doing things out of the middle. It was like, oh my God, everything that we kind of wanted to see felt like it was happening. So that's why it just kind of felt like the perfect storm. But yeah.
And I have to ask this, because I was watching at home. I was being able to see the vision of the Baggers at the Gabba, which was absolutely electric. It sounded like a home final. It was insane, the noise from the Carlton fans. You're at Icon Park, which would have been electric throughout that. What was the atmosphere like down at Icon, and what was kind of your experience being able to watch it in an almost game-like environment, but very, very biased in the best possible way?
Definitely. Yeah, no, kudos to the club and like how they put it on operationally. It was really good. We were wondering, like, are we not gonna, like, what if there's issues with the screens, might not have the best
there a
view,
glare, what's going on?
Glare. The sun was right behind the screens, like, oh, is this gonna set? But no, it was perfect, and they need to start doing this for like any away games, because I would be getting there anytime that we play outside of Melbourne. Like the broadcast would cut to Fags and big boos go around the crowd, and they cut to Vossi and massive cheers, like just the most nuffy energy possible. Like everyone was just so into it. And once we started rolling in the game, it was like, yeah, people were just looking at each other in disbelief. Like, yeah, it was just a good fan vibe.
It was definitely a really fun moment. It didn't, unfortunately, last forever, which is probably the really disappointing part to it. Brisbane end up really dominating that second quarter, end up at the main break trailing by 3 points. Brisbane got the momentum. They absolutely nullified us and really just took everything that we had done well in that first quarter and just stamped that out. and we never were able to kind of wrestle that momentum back for the rest of the game. It's been thrown out there by many, mainly opposition supporters, but I kind of want to get your thoughts on this. And those that are watching and listening this, drop it in the comments on YouTube. I'm keen to get everyone's thoughts on this. And if you're listening in podcast form, at Navy Blue Corner, on whatever social media you interact with us, there's also links in the description, so you don't even have to type anything in. But do you subscribe to this theory, Lockie, that with that 5-goal lead to start the game, that we bottled this one?
Oh, bottled is definitely not the word I would use. Like, I don't know how many games we could look at just in this season where a team has an excellent first quarter and then the other team levels it up in the second. Like, that feels like just such a common narrative, and it happens so often. And the big thing for us was, did anyone really think that Brisbane weren't going to have a run like this in the game at some point? So it was really on us to have more than one dominating passage in this game. So I don't subscribe to that.
No, I definitely don't. There's an element of it I think is definitely there. It's what made the disappointment, I think, really from this game, was that we put ourselves in a position to win. It's obviously only one quarter, and clearly this game really shows you that you need to play 4 quarters of football. One is not enough, and it's not going to get you the win, particularly in finals, in that crunch time. So to a degree, that's probably where a lot of the frustration comes from. But I don't think we bottled it, because as soon as, like you said, you knew Brisbane were going to bring it at some stage. I was hoping we were able to do what we had done in the other 2 finals, where when Melbourne or Sydney brought it to us, we are able to get that goal. It seemed like that was probably the most positive highlight from both of those finals, was that we were able to, when we needed to get a goal, we found a way. There was that belief, whatever it was, we got it done. Whereas this time, we just never really were able to get that going. We maybe had a few opportunities throughout the game to narrow the margin and swing momentum. We missed a few of them, but it never felt truly convincing, as if, okay, we've swung the momentum back our way. It felt like it was always Brisbane, really, from sort of quarter time onwards. So I don't think we bottled. I think just the better team did beat us, really, in the end.
Yeah, no, I think so too. But I think it's a different kind of disappointment. Like, if we had no runs in this whole game, and it was a win like I described earlier, just like a 40-point Brisbane win where they just won every quarter by a couple of goals, like that, to me, would be sitting here being like, we didn't like rock up, we didn't show any fight. So it doesn't really matter when you have that quarter. I guess actually it does. If we kicked 5 goals to 1 in the 4th quarter and lost by this, we'd probably be like, that's a bit lame. But if it happens in the first 3 quarters, then I think that's just part of it. Like, we finished 5th on the ladder for a reason.
Yeah, and it's so difficult when you don't get that home preliminary final. But the 100%. Fans tried their best to make it feel like a home final. We had the start, but I think that when you really watch this game and you try to take it all in, it's just so clear, I think, why we sort of lost this. And it's really, for me, like the main thing is that we had to win 9 out of 10 games to make finals in the first place. It was a grueling run. We had injuries. Half the other boys, like a Cripper, were having to shoulder the load for the whole midfield to try and get us over the line. That was grueling enough. Then you have 2 massive finals that are incredibly close, playing to the final siren. Like, how long can this run go for? It felt like there was that belief, but so much really just dropped off. The effort indicators, the pressure stats, everything really tapered off as the game got going. And do you think we maybe went too hard too early? Or do you think that was just a product of the momentum we kind of had going into this game?
Do you mean too hard too early in terms of the season, or in terms of just this game?
Just this game, based on the grueling run we had, that we sort of spent our tickets early, knowing we didn't have maybe the 4 quarters in the bodies.
Oh, wow. That is such a hard question. I don't think so. I think I think we had to, like you said, that felt like our best chance of winning was getting a jump and then trying to hang on. So, and it felt like the selection as well was a bit like that, like bringing in some of the runners and like we're gonna do everything we can to run out this game. Yeah. Oh, far out. That's what prelims are.
It is. They're tough, and I want more of them now. But I guess we've got to start to look at the negatives. What went wrong in this game? But we're going to do it with a bit of a more, which is very on brand, an optimistic outlook on this. So, Lockie, what for you went wrong in this game that saw our season come to an end? We're one game away from the grand final. I guess knowing what went wrong in this one, what happened, and how can we address those issues to make sure that we can go all the way next year?
Wow.
The big questions, mate. The big questions.
Yeah, far out. I've not got an answer prepared to this. I guess the first thing that comes to mind, like it's the slogan of this whole podcast, I guess, is the way that we are scoring, the way that we go inside 50. Like, people are talking about it. Charlie didn't have the final series that we hoped for. And obviously Harry was a bit all over the place too. I think, I don't know how to put this, but I think we need to have a bit more of a solidified way to get goals on the board next year. Because like as amazing as that first quarter was, how many times was it just bombing it into Harry, Charlie, and Martin kind of flying? And it worked a few times, but there was a lot of those times where it was like, oh, this could have been a bit better. And we were still getting inside 50s throughout the rest of the game, but it just wasn't, I don't know, it just wasn't as convincing as I would like.
Yeah, I think this game sort of showed all the deficiencies that we've seen throughout the year that at times it didn't look like they were there anymore. But this sort of really brought those to the forefront and showed areas that we clearly still need to improve on. And I think that was a big one. The ball movement, particularly inside 50, still definitely let us down in this game. Yeah. We just struggled to, whether it was creativity, whatever it was, there was a lack of movement inside 50 to find those targets like we have seen when we're playing our best. Do you think that an element of that was the lack of a settled forward line throughout this finals series? We've had Harry come in and out, Jack Martin do the same. We dropped Owies for this game. I want to talk about the changes in a bit more depth later, but do you think maybe not having consistent 6 or 7 guys throughout this final series that we just played throughout it, do you think a lack of settled cohesion sort of cost us a little bit?
It definitely doesn't help. Definitely doesn't help. But yeah, it's so hard to like, I want to give lots of credit to Brisbane too. Like this is the best team that we've played. Well, I think they're going to win the flag this week. So they're the best team in the league, arguably. So I want to think back to like when people say we were at our best at like the Freo, Port Adelaide games, when the forward line was just a well-oiled machine. But you can't compare those two things, I feel, because it's different opposition. And I think there's still all season that's been an underlying thing where we could be. It's just an area of improvement. If we get better at this, it's going to make a big difference to how many goals we're kicking.
I think so, because it's something that's been touched on quite a lot in the media, was our reliance on scoring from clearances, and that, which is weird because we started to score really well off turnover and create more from different avenues. It felt like there was a lot better movement throughout the season. Ball movement was a lot better. We were finding different ways to score. It was almost as if you take one area away from us, we find another way to adapt. But this game, we sort of failed to do that. And I think that's the clear area where we need to find new ways to score, whether that's different players to score through, whether it's just the way we are moving the ball, the way we're working around the ground. It was a big issue when we were as bad as we were this season, when we got to bottom 4. It definitely got turned around, but clearly there are still I guess, elements of it, percentages that can still increase for us to go from, the third best team this year to being the first best. It feels like there's still a little bit of a gap.
I don't know if you felt like this, and like I said, I haven't watched the game back. It felt like anytime we went inside 50 and the ball hit the ground, Brisbane had it.
Yeah.
And it was like Motlop, Fogg, Cotters, like Martin. I was like, how are we never being the first ones to get the ball when the ball hits the ground? So that's like a question. Like, obviously, Owies wasn't playing and Cunners, but is someone going to take like an extra step next year and be, I don't know, just a more dominant, small, mid-sized guy? I don't know.
Still feels like something we lack in. Obviously, a lot of criticism's gone, Charlie's way throughout this. And probably the one thing I'll happily critique is, and it's something that I think goes hand in hand with players not probably being at the fall of the ball when we needed it to, when we needed them to be, was just, I thought a lot of our forwards were playing behind too much. When we did have those entries inside 50, felt like we were caught behind. I don't know if there was just miscommunication of where they were wanting the ball to be, and that's maybe the element that we're alluding to here. But too many times Brisbane caught us because they were first to the football, and you're going, Charlie, you need to be leading at the football. You need to be in front. You shouldn't be in the position you are. And I think that cost us a few times when we were probably against the run of play, just needing a mark in our forward half. Just weren't really there. And Brisbane defensively set up so well. And we really struggled to get a lot going in that sense. But yeah, I think that forward cohesion and probably finding another small that can take that step. Is it Motlop with another season? Is it Durden? Is it a Martin the whole time? It could be on our list. And when get through the list analysis and everything that we'll be doing in the off season, that's where those conversations can really start. But I think it is clear that there is still an element that isn't there. Was there any other, I guess, key components you saw of this game that was where we lost it? You don't necessarily have to have the answer of how we fix it for next season. I won't make you have to answer that one, but just any other elements that you saw as negatives that we do still need to work on to become the grand finalists in 2024.
I guess you can go line by line, can't you? I mean, I struggle so much, and if you've got some clarity, please do. Mark Pitternet is the man that I struggle so much to judge how effective he is and how important he is to the team. Like, Vossi obviously talks about it all the time. This is the combination that he's wanted to do this season with both of them in there. I just cannot work it out, because there was plenty of times in this game where I was like, that was nice. That was a good little thing that you did there. But thinking about us being a premiership team next year, I'm still not convinced that it's those two and it's not TDK and Sauce.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I can't remember if it was the second or third quarter off by heart. There was that moment where De Koning goes off for a long extended period due to the knock he sort of copped in the side. Pitternet has to basically be the main ruck, and I really felt a big shift in momentum, particularly in our midfield and ability to win the contest when that happened. And I was crying out, being like, can we just, I hope TDK can come back, because we're all of a sudden, the Big O's killing us in the ruck. We're not getting hands on the football, and Brisbane are running all over us. And it just, unfortunately, in this game, it felt as if all the little things that we've mentioned this year, that if you were to say the worst thing of us, it was kind of shown and played out in this of there's still a little bit of an issue with our rucks. That second ruck behind De Koning, who I thought played decently well again this week, wasn't there. And it's everything else around the ground. There's a lot of times with Pitt, and I don't want to just single him out, but there's just a lot of times and moments on the ground where I don't know if he just isn't 100% fit. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but there's just a lack of chasing and endeavor to chase. I see him walking around the contest far too often, where just at least show me that you are trying, because you probably are, but it just didn't come across that way, particularly when trying to put on some defensive pressure. But that definitely didn't help our midfield. And I think that was the other area that kind of let us down when we stopped winning the contest, when we weren't able to get it done our way that we have been able to for this whole massive run in the second half of the season. It maybe felt like we just didn't have, I don't know if it's that next extra gear or that little bit of creativity, much like the forward line. Do we just lack like one more midfielder to change things? Walshy was incredible,
felt like it.
but it didn't feel like anyone else was able to go with him. Feels like that mid forward that we maybe thought Cunningham could be still. Who knows if he gets a full preseason, but that feels like the position everyone's now crying out for in the offseason based off this one game and a bit of this season. Is that something you think our midfield kind of misses and where Brisbane sort of took advantage of us not having that extra cog to turn to?
I think so. It's so hard because it's been such a long season. A number of guys are battered. Like Doc is a guy that was, played a whole bunch of midfield throughout our winning run. Who we love that he provides something different in there. It's funny. Walsh and Chera can still get better next season. Obviously, Cripps was not, able to perform to his full potential in this game. That's the reason why Peternet was one that comes to mind, was because pretty much every player that played is around it. I'm like, I can see it. I can see how you could be in our premiership side. It's the rucks where it's really obvious. So part of me is like, I do think that this midfield setup can go all the way, but if I'm going to target somewhere, I think it is a mid forward guy.
It's tough because I think you can easily just look at this one game and say that that's what we need because that the midfield is potentially where we did lose this game for long stretches. The other side of me kind of thinks like, is this just because we were so battered, because we were so gassed because of having to play 10 elimination finals just to get into the final series in the first place. And then you have two massive games, Sydney and Melbourne. How much did these boys have left in the tank? You've got so many like Doc, Akers, Cripps that they're kind of some of your main guys in the middle that can change the game for you. If they're battered and bruised, is that like an element that cost you in these games when you need to be 100%, when the game steps up a level? If you're not 100% fit, if you're carrying something, does that break away? Because we've seen it in every other game when we're maybe a little healthier with the guys at least on the field. The midfield wasn't an issue. We were able to go with anyone, different types of midfields. Do you think it's more we're missing a style of player, or it was just tiredness? If you could lay it down on one.
I think it's well, you can improve. You can always improve. You can always there's always a different guy that we could be bringing in. So I think I think the fatigue is a massive part of it. Man, some of the, I don't know how Blake has got through all of this. It seemed like every contest, it was like, how did he win that one? Like, it just shouldn't have been. He just shouldn't have. But as with any loss of ours, I feel like you look at like the bottom 6 or 7 guys, and it's like, like where was that Sydney game from Cottrell today? And they're the guys where you think about it, it's like, okay, well, if we just got a better performance out of this guy, well, maybe that's an extra goal or two. And but the future is so bright for next season because there's so many guys that didn't even enter the field in this game where it's like, I can see them easily cracking into this team. Why not? Zach Williams is going to come back. He's your midfielder, mate.
Yeah, who knows? That's what we recruited him for. Who knows what could happen with Big Zach? And it's such an interesting thing. I think there was a worry to an extent going into this final series, definitely this game of, Michael Voss, he's still incredibly I guess, inexperience, particularly in these big moments, this coaching group, do they have that nous to when it's not going your way? Do we have a lever we can pull? Is it a player? What you obviously don't want to go too far away from your game plan and what you're needing, but you need to tinker little things. And at quarter time, I knew Fagan was going to be able to change things and they were going to give their best effort, and how we were going to react was going to decide whether we were good enough to do it. Ultimately, we weren't able to get over the line. I think there is still a little bit in the coaching sphere that maybe we need to find another way when things aren't working. But it's so hard to begrudge them when look at what we were able to do to get to this point. Everything I'm questioning and we're both questioning out of this game, which is very fair. We're reviewing it in isolation.
Exactly.
It's what we've been able to overcome to get to this position. So it feels so weird to go harsh on it when the answers to all these questions, it feels like we did answer them to get to this point. It's such a weird contrast.
And when we were critiquing these things 3 months ago, it was like, how do we just win any game? Like, how do we improve things to just win a game? Right now, we're saying, what do we need to tinker with to win the entire thing and be the best team in the whole league? Like, we're close. We're close.
Because I thought a couple of things that maybe hurt us was that we were rolling. I think it was Doherty for a fair chunk of the game. He was playing a bit more half forward. We're rolling him up to the stoppage, which I didn't mind to try and win the contest. But that started to hurt us when Coleman was left by himself and he torched us throughout the game. I don't really feel as if we altered things to get it back on our terms in that matchup in that way. That was probably a disappointment. That was probably my main issue. And then, like, did you at any stage, should we have switched maybe a Charlie and Harry around a little bit more and said, hey, Charlie, you're not getting into the game as much as we'd like as that target. There's 4-on-1 half the time. Yeah. We'll let Harry go deep because he's clunking them, playing really well. And we'll let Charlie move up the ground, get a bit of confidence. We know he's such a good user of the football inside 50. Surprised me we maybe didn't pull that lever at some stage. But again, like, Vossi's probably also just trying to back in what's got him this far. And I can't really completely blame him for that.
Yeah, I'm so with you 100%. It's these things are easy to point out in hindsight and suggest all the things that could have been done different. But yeah, you could say to all these things, he's backed in what got us to this point, and a hell of a lot of the time it has worked out, and it just didn't in this one. Yeah,
and there's been so much improvement.
I was just going to say with Charlie, I mean, yeah, I don't know how much you want to delve into that. Like, would you say that you felt Charlie's performance in these finals is more about the way that he kind of went about things, or the way that as a team, like, did we as a team not enable him to be his best, or would you put it more on him?
See, personally, I would say it's 70-30, with 70% being the team, 30% being Charlie. I think there's elements of his game and maybe I don't want to say his competitiveness. That's probably not the right word, but just because of him not seemingly being at the front of the amount of times throughout this final series, his opponent, even almost one-on-one at stages, has been the guy in front. He has not been competing in the air. I remember against Melbourne, there's a few times that May sort of takes the mark, and he wasn't really competing. Now, is there an element of he's been overworked so much by 3 or 4 guys that he just doesn't have that energy? But again, I think so much of it is just that we weren't able to target him well. The ball inside 50 wasn't as good as it has been. No. I think some of that also comes down to the pressure that's on our players, and we haven't had that finals type experience. You have your game plan, you know how you want to move the ball, but that all of a sudden changes when you're under a lot more pressure than you probably have ever been in, and how you react to that's always difficult. Is that kind of how you see the Charlie debate playing out?
Yeah, pretty similar. I'd probably say 50-50. I just felt there was just so many moments where his individual efforts, it was like, that just didn't feel like him. Just didn't feel like him. Felt like that in the Sydney game, and it was like, well, he'll get better for the
Mm.
Melbourne game. Didn't happen, and then not for this one. So yeah, but I guess I put it out there. You never know if he's carrying an injury like so many of the guys are, and he's played every game now for 2 seasons in a row. Is that right? I think.
Yeah.
So he's played almost 50 games in a row after missing all those years. So I can't blame him, but I don't know. I just, an improvement from him next year would make a massive difference too.
Oh, I definitely agree. You sometimes in finals you need your star players just to have that moment of individual brilliance. I know so much of this season and what's happened in such a good way for us has been stop relying on the individuals, become more of a team. But those big moments, you need your stars to step up, and we probably didn't have that from our key players. But I believe that they're going to be so motivated and keen to right any wrongs that are potentially out there, and is a Coleman medalist for a reason. We all back him in. We know he's going to have a massive year next year. But
yes, sir.
Let's talk a bit about that finals experience, because got to ask the question, do you think our lack of finals experience compared to Brisbane, who they've played the last 5 finals series, I don't know how to use that plural, in a row, they've played them, and 3 of those final series, they have made the prelim. So incredible amount of experience from these guys. Do you think that played a big part in the loss, knowing that we've played 2 finals, they've played 5 years of it?
Yeah. I'm not sure I'd say big part. Without a doubt played a part though. Has to. I mean, every player that's played in finals talks about how different it is, and so without a doubt. I mean, I think the biggest part is just that Brisbane are, like I said, I think the best team in the league this year, and they had a week off. Like they're those kind of built-in elements, but the finals experience, I think, has to be part of it.
No, I think I genuinely agree so much with you, where it's not the whole part, because finals experience and big moment, I guess, experience didn't seem to matter in a crunch game against Sydney, and even closer game against Melbourne. So you can't all of a sudden just say, oh, we lost because we didn't have the finals experience. We didn't know how to win the close one. But there is obviously an element of that. And I think now the good thing is that we know the pressure, we know what it takes. But I do agree with you with the fact that they had the rest. They had the week off. They didn't play a massive grueling final against Port. They were able to kind of win that a little bit easier.
It's a good point too. Yep.
Yeah, they've got that maybe little bit more experience in the clutch moment, but I think it's maybe a bit more motivation for them as well. They had lost 3 prelims. Their group was so hungry to make that grand final. They knew when they went into the huddle at quarter time that they can't let one more moment slip. It's another home prelim. They need to make the grand final. They've had good football all year. That and being a bit fresher, I think, definitely plays a part. But the good positive is that we've got a bit more finals experience, and we kind of know what the benchmark is now, which is definitely a good thing.
Yeah, well said. And like you touched on earlier, it's not just the players either. Like Fagan and his team have been here before, and for Vossi, it's new as a coach. So God, this is just so good for us for the future.
So I guess let's go to the positives. What, in a positive light, can we kind of take away from this game? What are the kind of learnings that you think we can take to gear us up towards a big grand final win next year?
Wow, learnings. That's a really interesting way to put it. I'd love to hear yours while I sit on it, because I think there's so many positives that I already knew were good about this team, but I'm not sure what positives I'd take from the game per se that are new.
Yeah, I don't know if they're necessarily new, but the big one was just, and I'm also probably encapsulating the whole final series in this, not just the Brisbane game, but like I just touched on, I think the fact that we've got finals experience now into this list, and they have finals winning experience as well in those close games, that positivity is going to go such a long way with these boys. And to not get battered in the prelim away from home, to be so close in that game, so close from a grand final without getting embarrassed. Again, I think that this is such positive things for us to know what it does take. And also out of this game, like we've touched on, I think we kind of know a bit more of our deficiencies now.
Yep.
And you can kind of take away and solidify, okay, these were things we thought throughout the year. They definitely came to play when it mattered. So we know what we need to improve on now. It's a little bit clearer how to take that next step. I reckon is probably that positive out of it.
Yep. I like how you said that. I think it'll be interesting to see, like, oh God, I'd love to, again, be in the four walls and hear how the players are kind of debriefing on the season. But it'll be an interesting frame for next year that 13 wins is not going to cut it if we want to win the flag. Like you said before, us finishing top 4 is, and if we can finish top 2, would just make a massive difference. And I'm sure all the boys would have loved to have been able to have a week between the Melbourne game and this one. So, it goes without saying that we can't have another stretch like we did this year, next year, where we just lose everything and then have to win every game to make finals. So, it'll be fascinating to see how the next year kind of pans out, whether we're a bit more consistent throughout the whole year or, how that goes.
That was my other big note. It was literally secure finals earlier and the importance of top 4, like you mentioned, because if one of the things where, and I'm not saying like it's an excuse or we're trying to blame it, it was a fact and a factor in this final series and this back end of the season that we're battling so many sore bodies throughout. Cripper's carrying something, Doc, Akers, and I think Cripper even more so because we had Walsh not playing. We didn't have Chera for elements. He's having to carry the load so much more. And when every game was must win, just to get to that stage, you're having to expel so much more energy. Brisbane in the tail end of their season are maybe allowed to manage the squad a little bit more, manage the bodies. Then you get the top 4. So you get to play one game, win it, get the week off. It's insane what that freshness does to you and the little luck, I guess, with injuries late in the season. The fresher you are, the better you are, the way you've been able to manage throughout the season. I think that just clearly plays a massive part because the boys looked and felt spent throughout that game. Like they still fought to the end, which I think was a massive, massive positive. Even with 3 minutes to go until I think it was Lincoln McCarthy kicks the sealer. Like there was still a chance that we go down, kick one, and it's game on. That is massive for me that we were still in this contest and they never really gave up. Massive positive. But if we were just a little bit fresher, if we were able to manage the season, I think that's the big thing for next year. Secure finals early and be able to, and then, sorry, just to keep going here, but
no, I love it.
It just made me think as well, does that maybe allow you and I know Collingwood maybe didn't intend this in their last few weeks because of some injuries, but you can start to tinker a little bit. You don't want to tinker too much and go too far away from the stability and cohesion. But, you start to play another player in a different position or try a different role and see if you can unearth a couple of levers going into the finals like they maybe did with like a Jeremy Howe forward. Like, is that something, is there a player that we have that because we maybe don't need to win 5 out of the last 5, you can try something different and then use that in finals? Are these the little things that Brisbane were able to do that then give them a bit of a better chance in finals? It's something to think about, definitely.
Gosh, I know if you and I were at the coach's helm, we would be doing a bloody stack of tinkering. There's so many guys where I'm like, I wonder if they could do a role like that. So I hope we see a lot of that next season. Like, there's so much potential in this list and guys that haven't been tried in a lot of different roles and guys that have grown since they've been in particular circumstances. So gee whiz, mate. I'm scared already for when we're previewing next season in a few months' time. We're going to be struggling to keep a lid on it, I'm sure.
100%. Did you have any other, and it maybe doesn't have to be these learnings, but just some, whether it's an individual or just other positives that you can maybe take out from this game or from the final series?
I think, again, it's like we've spoke about the things that we knew could be our weaknesses, and the thing that we knew would be a strength is like the defense. It's just still just have so much faith in our defense. And Boydie came in for his first game in so long and just did so many nice things. I know he's one of your favorite boys, and so yeah, I think that the defense is something that we know that we've got the right kind of system defensively now that we can keep working on, and I think the personnel as well. Not saying that those 7 guys are necessarily going to be our best for next year. Like Chincotta had some moments in the finals that it looked like he was getting kind of tired as the season went on, but like the defense, like particularly in that first quarter, it was like, oh my God, are they going to do this all game? Are they just not going to allow anything to go through them?
Yeah, Vossi, he seems to, particularly throughout this year, really emphasize that this team and this game plan is built around that defense. That was it was the weird thing. I think it might have been after the Essendon game where they were talking about our inability to score and move the ball. And he was saying, no, like I know what the problem is. I know what we need to focus on. It's defense. And that sort of caught us a little all off guard, but it does seem like that is the best part of this team. It seems so stable. Feels like a position we have a lot of depth and versatility in. Even this game, we drop a Kemp, bring in a Boyd for a bit more speed and pace on the ground. There's different things we can do with it. You trust so many of them, and it does sort of allow us that amazing base. It's probably just the rest that we need to add a few more strings to our bow, whether it's another player running through the midfield, whether it's something else in our forward line to add to it. The defense is perfect. It's just kind of those other elements where there's just 1 or 2 things that we maybe need to build on. But I think one of those that's going to be very positive for next year is just, mate, Walshy with a preseason. The fact he has done this and had this year already having an injury throughout the year anyway, at the back half, you start to think, oh, God, what's going to happen when he does come back? Is he just not 100% conditioned? For him to have the final series he has and dominate in the way he has, now have the experience in the big moments. You said Brownlow then, genuinely, this guy with a full preseason is just going to be electric. It's insane to think about. Maybe that's the extra thing we need in the midfield, just Sammy Walsh.
So easy to forget how young he is and inexperienced. And he definitely is the poster boy for someone that now has got finals experience under their belt. And like you said, a proper preseason. Jesus Christ, it's going to be good.
Yeah, no, my last big positive was really just Harry's game. And I'm a little upset that neither of us, we had the time to record the match build-up show, because what was big was Ian's prediction in the final series. It seemed like I was able to predict anything that was coming up. I had the Cripper goal, I had the Walsh goal, and look, there's no proper evidence of this. The only people you can ask to get
this was coming. I knew
would be everyone in the room watching the finals with us before the game. I said this, and so fair enough. People might not believe me.
Get living here right now, Ian.
What would have been what do you want to see? My prediction was that, and I didn't know how it was going to happen. I wasn't willing to say it was 4 goals. I wasn't willing to say it was pressure. It was the match-winning mark, but it was just Harry silences the critics. He comes out and has that finals performance we all expected. And when he was able to do it, I think in that game, that just put a massive smile on my face that one, I'd kind of had that in my brain already. And so it just boosts the ego first and foremost. But then to know what Harry had been going through into this game, I think that was massive to see him clunk them, to put them through under the pressure. And I wanted to bring this up on the podcast because I'm kind of sick of the rhetoric I'm hearing from people about Harry. Like, I'm putting this on record. Yeah. I'm putting this on record. This is my rant for it, is you can really kind of find out who understands football and who doesn't from their opinion on Harry Mackay.
Love it.
No offense to some of the people I interact with at work and in the world, but they mention Harry Mackay and you get things like, oh, he's overrated, Harry Mackay's shit. And you hear this and you're like, I think it is absolutely fair and it is acceptable to say Harry Mackay is struggling with his goal kicking. There is something going on with him right now mentally that just isn't there. But you can't say he's shit at football. You can't say he's not clunking them. His work rate around the ground, his positioning, his pressure, all of that's still there. And if he was on the open market right now, mate, every single club in the AFL would be dying to get Harry into their team. It just annoys me, the criticism he gets for the meme value of him missing a really easy goal. Because guess what? No one's talking about how he was the best key forward that played from either team in this game. You hear nothing of it. And that's just so frustrating.
Love it.
But it's great just to see Harry back out there and the blue baggers getting around him.
Very, very well said. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, I feel like it's either, like you said, you just don't know football, or you don't watch Carlton and you pretend. You're pretending that you do. You pretend that you know what's going on when you actually don't watch these games and see all the things he did. I mean, he wasn't kicking the goals. Yeah, he was definitely before the game. I was like, if there's anyone that I want to stand up today, it's got to be him. So good on him.
Yeah, big confidence going into next season for sure. There's only a couple of key points I want to touch on before we wrap this up. And one of them we've talked a little bit about. So there's a couple of questions in this. Really just around team changes that you alluded to earlier.
Yes.
It was a big talking point pre-game, definitely post-game as well. We had Boyd coming in for Kemp, who was probably quite stiff to make way. And then arguably our best, probably small forward throughout the year, even though he maybe didn't have the greatest final series, Matty Owies also dropped. What did you, I guess, make of those team changes? Do you think we made the right calls? And if not, what changes, if any, do you think could have maybe made a difference on the day?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I'll continue to back the club and say that I think they did make the right calls, even though it was definitely unexpected, particularly the two omissions that you mentioned. And it's just so easy to have, the perfect hindsight in this situation and look at all the possibilities. But without a doubt, there was a lot of things they could have done that weren't this. The Kemp one surprised me heaps. The Owies one surprised me somewhat. Cunningham definitely would have been an omission for me as well. But yeah, I mean, where do you want to start? Like, yeah. What if it was you? What would have been different?
Well, when they made the changes, I was a little bit shocked with Kemp. I was like, oh wow, I didn't expect him to be dropped. But it all kind of made a lot of sense when you sort of looked at the rationale behind it. Okay, Brisbane's not that tall in defense compared to the two teams we have played. Kemp kind of got killed last week by Smith. He kicked 3 goals on him. Hasn't been playing amazing. Marchbank has been the one out of the two that's really stepped up. We need a bit more height. And Marchbank was huge on the night. Again, he's really stamping his authority for a new contract and to be in our best 22 to start next year with his form. Great to see from a man who's battled a lot. And then you can bring Boyd in, who then plays an absolute ripper game, able to use the ball outside of into the D50, moving the ball up, which is something we still struggled with. But I think you probably would have been worse off if you didn't have Boyd in there trying to make things happen. And then in the forward line, it's probably the toughest one. Martin has to come in. Harry has to as well. Cunningham moves out. There still felt like there was a little bit of a mid-forward connection loss. There was a small forward loss somewhere. But I don't know. It's so easy in hindsight. It's so easy. It worked well in the first quarter. Felt like it was the right move with always not really impacting. You get enough pressure from your Martin, your Fogarty, your Motlop. But at times, maybe we were calling out for a Matty Owies in that game. But it's, again, when you look at his last 2 games and you're going off form, it's not as if he was kicking 4 goals every single game and dominating. So it's hard to really look back in hindsight and say we should have done this, should have done that. Probably the only thing is maybe looking more towards the underdone players, which is my maybe other question too. Do you think we maybe carried too many of these injured players in? You had guys like Cripper battling, Doherty, Akers, and I maybe want to highlight Doc because you sort of moved him more to that half forward role rather than the wing, brought Hollins in to cover that move. Do you think that we sort of went away from what worked because we were dealing with the injuries? Do you think that was an issue with this game?
It's possible. When you lose any game, I think the selection team are damned if they do and damned if they don't. Like if they took Doherty out when he could have played, and with a bit of a different role, like you mentioned, and then we lost, it's like, well, why didn't we just play our best players in the big games? So it's so easy in hindsight. And on the Kemp thing, because I was looking into it after it happened, because I was like, oh, this is quite surprising. And last time we played them, which a game that we all remember very well, we did play with the 4 kind of talls, and Gunston was even playing in that game, and
we got killed on the ground.
It was Cameron kicked 4 and Bailey kicked 4. So imagine if we went into this game with the 4 talls, and they've got 1 tall even less than this game where the smallest torched us. That would be, that just doesn't make any sense either.
No, and look, you look at the names that are carrying some injuries. I get it, but you'd be a fool not to play all of those boys. Like, you're not dropping Doc. You're not, like, even Doc with like 1 arm is probably better than a lot of the others, and it kind of goes to that.
You're going to name a name then.
I wasn't, but it wasn't
Jesus,
burying someone. No, SPS doesn't play for us anymore, so we can't give him that, drive by anymore. Not even on an AFL list. Sorry, mate. Apologies. One last time for good
What
memories.
An unexpected drive by.
Had to. But it wasn't as if a lot of the fringe players in this were playing ridiculously at that moment. They didn't have the form to single out a guy like a Cunningham, who was probably maybe that guy that you could have put in to help that mid-forward connection.
Yeah.
Just wasn't playing the best football at that stage. And I understand what they went for. You looked at Hollins when he came on against Melbourne. All of a sudden, he's bringing energy. He's taking the game on, and it allowed a bit more versatility. And in the first quarter, Cottrell, again in that half-forward role, looked really good. Kicks the first goal of the game, and parts were working. So I don't really begrudge the selection for the injured players or the moves they made. I think they made sense, and it just kind of is what we touched on. We need guys to be fit. We can't be having to win every single game for 10 in a row just to make finals. It's just not a recipe for success, and it's a credit that we got to where we did, and ultimately it probably played a bit of a part in us not being at our 100% best to get over the line, which is always tough.
Yeah, 100% right. Everything has to go right for it to all come together, and it almost did, and it's going to next year.
100%. I've got one last question, one last topic before we do our votes.
Do it.
Which will be the last votes for the season. We won't give away the winner. That will be in the season review. You'll have to wait for that one where we go back over predictions. It'll be a lot of fun. And then maybe this is a bit of a palate, not palate cleanser, but it's sort of getting you ready, getting your taste buds ready for the season review.
Entree.
Yes, that's probably the word I was looking for. The appetizer.
I like it.
Because you brought up a really good point in, I believe it was the Melbourne match review, talking about, we're talking about how good the wins were, that game and the Sydney game, how we're all feeling. And you mentioned that, like, are these going to be those games that we look back on with super fond memories, or will the way that our season ends make us maybe look a bit more negatively towards these? Because if you get into the grand final, maybe you lose it by a point. It's a disaster of an end of a season. You didn't maybe have that optimism to finish the year. Does that ruin the Melbourne game? Does it ruin the Sydney one? So I got to ask you the question, now that we know how our season finished, how that Brisbane game ended, does that change your feelings and maybe your memories and how you'll look back on those 2 finals wins?
I mean, I think if anything, it makes them in even more of a positive light. I think part of it, when we were kind of breaking those wins down, it was like, we spoke about how the Richmond final is so clear in our minds, and because it's so few and far between how many good games like that we've been able to witness. And I'm like, are these games going to kind of get lost in years ahead when we're just winning heaps of finals year after year? And my feeling right now is I don't think so. I think all of these games we're going to remember them all super clearly. They all have their own storyline and narrative attached to them. And so losing this Brisbane one definitely doesn't change my feelings about them. I'm going to remember this Brisbane game as, remember that year, like the first year that we finally announced ourselves and we had a couple of super close, hard games. Brisbane had the week off and we jumped out of the gates, kicked the first 5. How good was it? And then they were too good for us in the end. And I think that's how I'm going to remember it. And that's going to be a good memory of this game in the long term as part of this journey.
No, I love that outlook a lot. I mean, let me know if you're listening, watching to this, your sort of reflections, your feelings towards this. What is it going to mean going forward? Because I tend to really agree with you. You got sort of 2 ways I think you can look at it, which is either to predict ahead. All of a sudden, we don't play finals for another 10 years, and these 2 finals wins are reflected upon in such a good light because it was the only memories that we had that were positive in finals, or we go on to have good success, and this was the Kickstarter. This was the first moment that started it all, and that's what I'm hopeful that this game can be. It's such a better... It's heartbreaking in a way because we were so close to a grand final, and it's been so long since 1999. We were both 3 years old since the last time we played a prelim. They're hard to get into. It doesn't guarantee you to play in one next year. It's going to be tough. A lot has to go right. We know what work needs to be done. So there's always that part of you that goes, was that our moment to have the momentum to keep going? Was it the missed opportunity? But compared to how last year ended in such heartbreak, where the optimism was surely this is the turning moment that they use this for motivation, but there was no evidence that it was based on. It was pure hope. I think this time there's the evidence. We made finals. We announced ourselves throughout the season. We showed we could get it done. The only mental demon now is probably that we still haven't beaten Brisbane and we haven't beaten them at the Gabba. That's the only one to cross, and hopefully we can get that done next year. But I think there's so much more tangible evidence and optimism going into next season. And yeah, it's not the way we wanted it to end. But God, if you told me so many stages throughout this season, would you take playing off in a prelim? 100%. 100%. Did you have any last things you wanted to say before we jump into the votes and wrap this episode up?
I'll just say I really, as you kind of started the podcast with, I didn't know what kind of Ian I was going to get today. I didn't know whether it was going to be the level-headed optimist or whether you were going to come in with a bunch of heat and rip these boys a new one. So I'm glad we're leaving the season on the same page as we started it.
I like it. It's hard. It's hard not to be proud of these boys for everything they've been able to do, dig in from where we were. It's overstated, but almost somehow understated to be bottom 4 in like round 15, make finals in the way we did. 9 out of 10 wins, win 2 ridiculous finals, almost beat Brisbane in Brisbane, battered and bruised, incredible effort. And to finish it off, the votes, Lockie, the last votes of the season, we'll be announcing the winner of the unnamed medal that we will make sure that there is a name. Again, last minute names. We've had a few suggestions. We've loved the input. We're going to decide on it. You'll hear it in the next episode, the season review. But if you want any last minute names, chuck them in the comments on YouTube, at Navy Blue Corner, at the socials. Let us know your suggestions. We're still open. We're not 100% decided, but we'll announce the winner. And the final votes, Lockie, I need you 3, 2, and 1. Best on ground. We may decide a winner right here. Who did you give your votes to?
S-Dub18 for the 3. Bog. What a finals.
By far.
What a finals. It's not close, is it? And then 2, man, I was so impressed throughout this game. I was like, oh my God, this, it felt like his best game for a long, long time, which was Gov for me. I gave the 2 to. And then it was actually, then this one, I feel like it could have gone a lot of ways. So I'm giving a bit of a, how do I put it? Just a good on ya vote. Probably wasn't the 3rd best guy, but I'm giving Boydie a vote because did so many nice things. Like there was a lot of eyes on him as like, does this guy, I don't know how many games Boydie's played in his career, but would be less than 20. is he the right guy to come in? And I thought he stood up and showed that he can be part of a really good side next year too. So give him a vote.
Gee, incredible from you. Clutch there with the stats, mate. 16 games he has played.
16.
So the man knows his stuff without having to give me the specifics, which we love. No, I really enjoy how it feels like we do our votes. There's been a lot of contentiousness, I guess, around the votes recently in a particular Brownlow that went to a Chalky Neal, which was very controversial. But we let you know our votes. And I feel like we often use the one to really, because the one can go to so many people. And I love that both of us tend to give it to the guy that maybe shouldn't have got the one, but it's just like you did so much. You surprised me. You deserve a vote for what you did. I love that. I love that you went that way. Been very similar, very on brand, being almost identical this week. Walsh obviously with the 3. Gave 2, however, to Wiedering. Thought he was sublime in defense. Big marks, did a lot for us. Moved the ball quite well as well. And then the 1, I almost gave that almost charity vote to Harry Mackay because of what he was able to do, be that key forward for us. But just Gov, he was your 2. I gave him the 1. I just thought there's no way I could not give him votes for what he was able to do in defense. It was the best part probably of our game. In the end, you can't do a lot when it's coming in that hot and fast, but those guys get the votes. Let me know your votes, though, who has listened to this in the YouTube comments at Navy Blue Corner. Let me know your thoughts to everything we have covered. And look, this may signal the end of Carlton's on-field season and the reviews for 2023. But guess what? There's no off-season for us. We don't stop. There's plenty of content that will happen for the Navy Blue Corner as we head towards season 2024. We've got season review episode, and mate, we got trades to build up. We got trades to recap the draft, and there's so many fun little reflection videos to go throughout. Content will not stop here, so make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or follow wherever you listen, so you don't have to search, you don't have to worry about, mate, it's been a week. When are these idiots going to bloody post an episode? Because unfortunately, it may not be every single week like it has been throughout the season, but there's plenty of content. So make sure you follow and subscribe because that way you're never going to miss it. And also on those socials, we'll be posting when the episodes are out. It just makes it so much easier for you. One click of a button and all of a sudden you never have to search a thing ever again. But last thing I wanted to say while I'm babbling on is just a massive thank you to those that do listen, subscribe, and follow because it's been insane seeing how many people interact with us every single week. The amount of people that listen, you know, when you start the podcast, it's kind of just because we chat and we wanted to see if anyone shares in the opinions. We kind of wanted to build a bit more around going to the footy. It felt like, you know, we have a couple of mates here or there, but it's so great to go to games, to have people to chat to be on socials all the time throughout the week, having incredible conversations. So, man, the community that we're a part of, that you guys have allowed us to be a part of your lives has been incredible. Love the season. It's been an absolute ripper, and I'm sure 2024 will be even bigger. But that is going to wrap this episode up. Up the bloody baggers. See you guys next time.